Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Carledge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. But we will start today's episode where I'm excited to continue my conversation with the awesome Alan Yoakum. If you haven't listened to the first part of our conversation, you can find it as the previous episode on whatever app you're listening to this show on. In that episode, we explored Ellen's journey in getting started with working with animals and doing animal research and what's led her to her current work, working with a team at Pet Harmony. It's definitely worth a listen. However, if you haven't listened to it yet, you are, of course, welcome to start here with part 2, where you're going to still gain plenty of insights to help you grow your skills, knowledge, and confidence in your animal training journey. So let's dive in. Alan, thanks so much for coming back to hang out with us again on the Animal Training Academy podcast show.
I'm so grateful to be here again. You're such a delight to talk to.
Oh, thank you. Makes you feel all warm and fuzzy and straight back at you. Now, when we caught up, I've got in my notes here when we caught up last week, but we have postponed this about 4 times now because life kept getting lifey, as good friend Emily Johnson-Vane would say. So when we caught up, however long ago it was, to discuss topics for this episode, you mentioned some super interesting things that you'd like to discuss today, so I can't wait to explore these with you. The first idea you framed as how we apply what we accept to be true. From what I understood, test my understanding here, what you were saying is that this has to do with the powerful idea of taking the learning principles we know work so well with our non-human learners and thoughtfully translating them to our interaction with human learners, with our primate learners. A huge part of this, as you mentioned, is the goal of creating, or you mentioned to me, is the goal of creating genuine safe spaces, not just for the pets and other beings we are responsible for, but critically also for our clients and for ourselves as professionals. So this makes me think that when we're in a learning environment with our clients, there's 3 learners there. There's ourselves, there's the human primate client, pet guardian, whatever we want to call them, learner, and then there's also the non-human learner, whether that's a dog or a cat or a horse or a parrot or whatever species you're working with. Did I understand what you meant when you said how we apply what we accept to be true?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time this year thinking about generalization of the things as I help other pet professionals develop their skills in consulting and training and applying an enrichment framework to a bunch of different aspects of their life. And one of the things that I keep falling back on is we probably already have a skill for this. We just don't know how to unlock it. And we do that for pets all the time. Like, we look at where is the place that we can start? What are you showing me that I can build on? But we don't. I'm using we collectively. I'm really proud of anybody who has figured this out already. But where is the starting point for ourselves for the thing that we would like to accomplish? Like, what do I already have a framework or a frame of reference for that I can go ahead and kind of leap into and build from there?
Well, this is funny because the listeners of the show don't know this, but this is exactly what you and I naturally talked about that I brought up in between recording episode 1 and episode 2. And I said to you before we pushed this record today on part 2, I said, do you remember what we talked about? Because it was quite a while ago now. And you're like, good question. And I hadn't read my notes here before I asked you that. But it's funny that our conversation for part 1 led to naturally us talking about this anyway. We were talking about this idea that human learners, ourselves, our clients, potentially are, I'm going to say, challenged with generalizing our behavior across contexts. And I think the word I used was we suck at it in between podcasts
It's so
recording.
hard.
Why? Because then you came up and said this is something that has been really playing on your mind for the last 2 years. And did I understand you correctly in between recordings that you said you've dedicated this year to focusing on why?
I like a challenge, and it seemed like a really helpful challenge in the long run. Like it was in 2025. I don't really do what are they called, resolutions or anything. But part of my growth work is like, what are your values? How do you guide to your values? How do you live by your values? And one of the things that crossed my values that I was like, generalization, the skill of that would make a lot of this a lot easier. And I work with so many professionals that we keep making jokes about how generalization is hard. And we tell our clients that generalization is hard. And I had this moment where I just said to myself, I'm kind of thinking about what 2025 has in store for pet harmony and the things we want to add and build and the skill sets that I would like to be stronger in. And I thought, I understand behavior. Well, I wouldn't consider myself an expert in comparison to other people in my field. I have an understanding of how behavior change works. I understand how generalization works. Why am I not intentionally practicing the skill of generalization in my life? Because I can, and so I will. And that's kind of where this whole year has taken me, taking moments to reflect and say, what do I have? What is already in my, you have young listeners, they may not know what this is. What's in this Rolodex I have up here of information that I can pull from and then better understand a thing that I truly don't understand? Like, can I put it in a frame of reference that makes sense? And one of the skill sets that we get asked for help with in our mentorship program time and time again is client communication skills. How do I get the client on board? How do I get the client to follow through? How do I get feedback from my client? How do I get all of these things? And the answer is maybe we need to change the question. What question would you ask yourself under similar contexts if it was a dog or a cat or a bird? Would you be asking the same question? The answer is no, let's ask a different question. Second one is, if this was a dog or a cat or a bird or any other creature, non-human, how would you be approaching it? Because there's a lot of skills that a lot of us have spent a long time developing with non-humans that we can apply in our interactions with humans. And it's going to make it a little less scary, a little less frustrating, hopefully.
Yeah, I love this. This thing we're talking about now is just applying what we know to be true to ourselves. I'm actually doing a talk, Ellen, for the pet parent educators of Jennifer Shryock's program as a pet parent educator myself. And it's specifically what we just talked about, is how we can use the skills that we already have to manage those challenging conversations. I always think about that in terms of one of the concepts that Susan Friedman taught me, and Steve Martin as well, is the concept of the trust account and building trust up with your animals and building relationships up with your animals. And we all know how important that is if we want to start to work with our animals and shape their behavior. using positive reinforcement. We need to build a relationship up. We need to build some trust up first. They need to know we're the provider of predictable and pleasant events. We know that. We know that. But then maybe we see a human on the street and they are pulling their dog along. And when their dog does something that that particular individual human doesn't like, they give it a little bit of a yank. And we feel compelled to go up and tell them knowledge with no relationship. That person's like, I'm not looking for knowledge. I have no idea who you are. And what are you talking about? You're telling me that I'm doing things wrong. I've lived with dogs for 30 years. Where's the relationship part? Like it's gone. Like we know this, yet in that context, and it's a purely hypothetical context about no one in particular, just a situation that I feel potentially people might identify with. Though, like when we see that stuff, like we're compelled to help the non-human learner, right? Now you're talking about generalization, so let's circle back to that, and maybe for the listeners of the show, let's start to talk about dogs or other non-human learners. Can you just explain to everyone what generalization is?
I'm looking at, can I use this skill? Can I see this behavior? Can I elicit, or is this behavior available? I'm kind of changing the words around because the context matters. Is this behavior available to us in a variety of contexts, times, events, cues, conditions, all of those things? So can my dog sit in my office? Can my dog sit while I'm sitting? Can my dog sit while I'm laying down? Can my dog sit in every room in the house in a bunch of different ways? Can my dog sit on the front porch? Can my dog sit in the back porch? Can my dog sit in the car? Can my dog sit at the vet clinic? Can my dog sit in all of these things? When we start to see that sit is happening in all these different places, we start to say that generalization may have occurred. And so sit is really tight. A lot of the skills that we are using as humans tend to be significantly greater when we get to a certain point. We're incorporating a lot more than we may say is incorporated into a sit. So when I'm looking at, for my pet parents, the skills of generalization that I really want to generalize, I want, when in doubt, get them out. And so I have a lot of people, for those of you that don't know, I work primarily with maladaptive behaviors, fear, anxiety, aggression, separation anxiety, resource guarding. So quality of life is impeded for someone in the household, usually everybody in the household, I'll be honest. In those cases, one of the skills that I want my people to really generalize, and I want to be fluent to the point that their body is working before their brain has gotten on board, is when in doubt, get them out. And that might be themselves, that might be their dog. It really depends on what we're working on. But I want the body to be, when in doubt, get them out. Their body feels doubt, their body is getting them out. That is the kind of generalization that I want for my pet parent in a lot of ways. Other ones that are maybe a little less extreme is observe what's happening. So I am deeply committed to making it so that both the clients that I work with and their pets are not having things done to them. They should be having things done with them. So if we have a training scenario, so we're teaching a dog to be comfortable home alone, the paramount thing that client, the skill they need to have and apply and generalize is reading, observing, and interpreting their dog's body language. That's the only way that we can ensure that we are not doing this stressful, sometimes really painful, hard thing to the dog. We can ensure that we are doing it with the dog's feedback, with the dog's consent, with the dog's engagement. And so I want those to be skills that they can do across the board in a lot of different contexts.
And it's okay. So the problem is that it's hard. It reminded me of a story that Veronica Patelli told me, where she was teaching a class. People used to do that, and they were teaching these clients nose targets to hand, and all the clients passed the class. They got their little certificate or whatever, and then they went out to the parking lot to go home, and she went out and she watched people pushing their dogs in the cars and like pulling their leads. And that was I think a great example of the inability to generalize what one was doing in the context of a class environment 5 minutes ago to this new context with a learning history of being at the car need to get your dog into the car. So how do you, well, let's use the examples that we've talked about. Firstly, do you think people are missing that point in their consultations to teach skills to pet owners and then be like, okay, cool, you've done it, so we're good, and I'll see you later? Versus like, cool, you can do this in a training context with me present, but can you do this without me present?
Yeah.
In all of his other different contexts. Do you think that's being missed?
I think it's probably largely being missed because humans are different. We tend to treat humans differently than we would treat other critters, species of individuals. So not everybody is missing it, but I think we tend to have a one and done type of idea. Like, I've seen you demonstrate it maybe 1 or 2 times. We talked about it in 2 sessions. Okay, I check that box and I move on. And we can assert that the client is going to continue doing that. But one, if we're talking about generalization, I think we can, if we were practicing a skill of going to station. So dog jumps up onto dog bed is the behavior that we may be talking about. If we were to map the training plan that we presented for the human to acquire the skill, not the training plan. I'm not talking about the training plan that we presented to the human to teach the dog. But if we were to take a step back and write a training plan for how I teach a human to go to bed, and then how I teach a human to continue using going to bed, I would suspect that we would have how I teach a human to teach a dog to go to bed would be maybe half a page. Some of you might be much more verbose than I would be, maybe half a page. The training plan of teaching a dog to go to bed and use it under different contexts with strangers present and guests over and the smoke detector going off and somebody knocking at the door and all of these other things where we might say it is appropriate and desirable for a dog to go to bed under these things would be pages for each of these different contexts until we start to see that the dog is openly offering that. And then I picked a behavior that is relatively stable in a home. If we move houses, we would not expect the dog to necessarily pick up, oh, knock on door in new house means go to bed. We wouldn't have that expectation. And yet we would say, well, human, I taught you go to bed 2 years ago and you moved to a new house. Why didn't you just ask your dog to go to bed? But like conditions we're all, whether we want to be or not, we all have the same learning principles applied to us. And so I think, yes, it's probably missed often.
Now, the thought that comes to my mind when I ask that question is like, well, it's missed often because we can't hand our clients a 15-page document that will have a high likelihood, I think, for a lot of individuals of failing for a bunch of reasons. Secondly, we are asking people to part with money for our services to solve their problems, which they don't understand a lot of the time. And so they have limited resources to do it with as well. So those factors would come into play with regards to acknowledging the need to generalize the human's behavior. How do you take those factors into consideration when you're thinking about your human clients? Let's use the if in doubt, get out example.
These are really, you have such great questions. The first one, I'm going to forget the second one by the time I answer the first one. But the first one was,
I'm not that good at asking questions because I always ask like 5 in one. And so anyway, sorry.
I think they're fascinating questions. I thoroughly appreciate when somebody asks me to reflect on my own assumptions. I gain so much from that. It's makes my brain feel nice and strong. It's strength training for my brain is the way I think about it. So the first one, we can't hand our client a 15-page training plan. And yet how many people are. And so again, back to the generalization, I'm gonna make a wide sweeping statement, and I apologize if this is wrong. We would never try to accomplish a 15-page training plan with a learner in a single session if it was a non-human. And yet we're still trying that with the human. So I think that's the first thing that we should reflect on is like, does it need to be 15 pages? Or do I not fully understand all of the ways that I could slowly practice generalization? And if you haven't watched Ken Ramirez, either taken his course or done any of his Clicker Expo on generalization, I think it's really helpful to see all the ways that we can practice that skill that are not, I need a new environment, I need a new location, because practicing sitting versus standing, or lying down versus carrying a laundry basket, or I have my treat pouch on, I have my treat pouch off. Like there are so many ways that we can practice that without having to practice everything. So the first one is we can't handle the clients a 15-page training plan. Nah, we certainly can't. We shouldn't. We wouldn't do that for a dog. The second part is they paid us to fix a problem. And this is one of the biggest mindset hurdles that I have seen with professionals, because at least for my clients, caveat asterisk, my clients that we spend a lot of time cultivating, identifying who we work best with, and all of the things. My clients aren't paying me to solve a problem. My clients are paying me to fix a pain point, and those are not necessarily the same thing. And so when I come into the scenario, and if you are a KPA CTP, there's a webinar on identifying the pain point that I did. People may come to us and say, I need my dog to sit when guests come over. And I would go in and be like, oh, you just want your dog, if you listen to part one, you just want your dog to sit when guests come over? There's like a million things that go into your dog being able to sit when a guest come over. It's not just sit when a guest come over. And so what we need to identify is, what is the pain point behind this? So do you need your dog to sit when guests come over because you have, your mom comes over regularly and you're afraid that she's going to get knocked down? So what I need to fix is that fear around your mom getting knocked down. I got 18 different ways to do that I could do it quicker than asking your dog to sit when his favorite person, grandma, comes over. It may be that the dog has really long nails and they want the dog to sit because every time they come home, it's like a nature documentary when the dog jumps up and rakes their legs. The pain point is physical pain. And then it might turn out that the real pain point is that the dog tries to bite them every time they go to do their nails. They felt shamed when they tried to take them to a groomer or a vet. And so what I need to work on is that nail trim, not the sit when guests come over. So one is figuring out what the pain point is, because often if we figure out what that pain point is, the solution is there are going to be much simpler solutions than some of the things that we would typically present in that scenario. In the context of things like classes. So back when I used to teach classes, I really wanted people to start to think about, can I use a nose to hand target for all of these different things? And so day one might have been nose to hand target. Most dogs, assuming they didn't have any aversion to hands or anything like that, we had a pretty solid foundation. And then the homework was practice nose to hand target in 4 places. And if you are somebody that's going to forget, go outside into the parking lot, practice in your car, practice right outside the door, practice around the block, and then practice when you get home. You got your 4 places and you're done. And so your homework can be intentionally, I want you to practice this in a variety of locations. Or if you have, like the way our facility was set up, we had private stations for each individual. Humans are funny. We're gonna, you pick a seat when you get into class and that's your seat for the rest of the class. You can prompt your clients and say, hey, I would really like it. Can you go do this pod over here? Or can we rearrange the room so that your client, again, is getting that generalization experience without having to overhaul everything? And those little changes can make a big deal. That was question 1.
And what question 2 was?
Oh, money. I think was that the second part of it?
It is now, even if it wasn't.
I remember money was in there. 1 is, again,
resources.
check it. check that you're addressing the pain point, not necessarily teaching the skill that your client says the dog needs to learn.
Mhm.
Figure out why they think they need to learn that skill, and then like just verify whether or not that is. If you are a nose work instructor, you are doing like competition obedience or something, and this is not going to be as applicable for you because you have people coming to learn a very specific set of skills, but you may also not need that same level of generalization. I think getting really comfortable having, for some people, what would be uncomfortable conversations is the best way around that. So if I have a client that I am perceiving is like hemming and hawing about when we're going to meet next or whether or not they should have a second appointment or any of those things, and they are forthright that like finances are really hard, then I'm forthright with them that say, okay, let me adjust my plan. I need you to know that I wouldn't normally give you this much stuff, but I want to meet you where you are, whether that's financial or skill, or it does not matter what that boundary is. I want to meet you where you are. And so I might give you more than I would like to. Here's how I want you to chunk it down so that you are still only getting little bite-sized pieces that you need to focus on, but maybe you don't need to see me as often in order to make that same progress.
There are so many thoughts swirling around in my head right now, and I feel anxiety that I'm going to lose them because they all seem so valuable and important to this conversation. But I want to talk about in relation to everything we're talking about, what you just shared, what it must be like for the client to generalize what we're teaching them across contexts, and how we might, because I want to transition as well to thinking about ourselves and how we might develop empathy for that and thinking about our own experiences. Before I do that, though, circle back to that, I just want to like acknowledge what you just said about finding the pain points. I think that's so valuable. I think the enthusiasm that we feel when we start to learn this information and wanting to go out and help all the things and know how to change behavior, we like lose sight of that. I've always thought about like three types of problems. There's like the dog sitting or doing something, jumping up when visitors come. There's the embarrassment of that in front of the friends or whatever. And there's like the good or bad, like, can I have this? Can I keep this dog? Like, they're ringing us because they're at the end of their tether. Like, they're pushed to the end. But tackling like there's many of those problems as you can tackle, especially that how that makes those humans feel. Like if you can remove that uncomfortable feeling and give them confidence, I think that's super powerful. So I just wanted to acknowledge like how awesome what I think you just said was. Now, circling back to generalization, and share a recent example with you from my life, thinking about generalizing myself across contexts. Time being like a context, distance antecedents being part of the context. So recently made some life-changing adjustments to my diet. So I am eating whole foods, minimizing processed foods, very conscious of the types of oils I'm consuming, taking a bunch of vitamins that I've researched and really changed my life. Like gave myself prolonged energy throughout the day, with a whole bunch of other changes. And then I went on holiday. I was like, screw that. I'm gonna drink beer. I'm gonna eat burgers. And I'm gonna eat chippies, and I'm just gonna enjoy food. Now I'm back from that period, and I'm like, gonna transition back into the healthy lifestyle. So I would say that's a different context because now I've got these other antecedents in place. Just come back off holiday, just got lots of reinforcement from delicious food and alcohol and oil and salt and all of this good stuff. And so there's that. And then there's also like, and I've been working on communication stuff myself. And then generalization with communication is like, for me, can I do this when I'm had good sleep, I'm eating good, and I don't have any time sensitive big decisions on my plate throughout the day? Versus can I do that when I haven't slept well, I haven't eaten well today, I'm not hydrated, I've got a lot of time sensitive decisions on my plate. They have significant outcomes. I'm feeling a little bit stressed. I'm tired. I'm groggy from poor food. Can I do those skills? I often say, I wish presenter Ryan could talk to husband Ryan with regards to my presenting, which is something I borrowed from Susan. So generalizing my communication skills across. But one thing I've been thinking about recently, Alan, is like, I'm 41 years old, right? So we talk about behavior science and we talk about 41 years of learning history for like doing things a certain way. So we've got that. But I've just been like, I don't know how accurate this is because I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know if you knew that about me, but I'm not. But like those 41 years of learning history, right? They've got like neural connections in my brain. Like they're formed. Like in this context, when you're stressed and tired, you're going to do the default thing because you don't have to think about it. You don't have to put energy into it. Like there's some synapses just fire. So like, then we build a new skill and we got to like, so again, I don't know if this is true or not. I think it is from my understanding of the brain. Like we're forming new synaptic connections. We're like, if you do this thing, then you can do this instead, and you can get this outcome. But like the 41 years is like a deep chasm of like neural connections that will just like automatically fire across a huge range of contexts, especially when you're sleep deprived, stressed, and tired, and all of the stuff. Versus new, like really fragile, like just starting to form synapses. And the expectation we place on ourselves is like that new learning history and that new connection we made in our brain is going to outweigh like this other chasm of a neural connection and learning history. And that's just doesn't happen. It's like nearly like biologically impossible. And so you think about our clients and in the situations you've described, like how are they going to like we teach them to nose target in a class, but they've got their default behaviors. And it's stressful and embarrassing when your dog's not going in the car after they perform so well in a positive reinforcement environment. I'm just throwing it at you, seeing where it lands. You tell me.
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. And if we were to go back to how do we generalize like your experience, I have worked really hard to acquire the knowledge of the thing that I would like to do. I have researched it. I have tried to build the skill of the thing that I would like to do. I have put in effort. I believe I have gotten reinforcement under specific conditions. We also have to ask ourselves, would it be ethical to ask you to generalize those skills under the conditions under which they are no longer available? Because to put you in a situation where you could be hungry, but all of your other needs are met, maybe we could practice it there. And like, that's a very natural thing. But if you're anything like me, the point that you get hungry where those skills are no longer available is in fact not a place that you should be. Like you are working actively to not end up there, which is a different skill that should take priority over can I be my dream self when none of my needs are met? Is better beneficial for us to say, what skill do I have to generalize to make sure that my needs are met the majority of the time, understanding that there are going to be either for our pets or ourselves, there are going to be times where our needs are not met just foundationally. It's going to happen. And then we're going to have some hard time. Perhaps we can buffer with some things. So like, because I work with pets who might be a risk to themselves or others, or have usually a risk to themselves and others in some way, shape, or form, we spend a lot of time talking about, let me start over. I spend a lot of time trying to shift my clients' focus from how can I be perfect? Because again, if you listen to part one, spoiler, perfection does not exist and you will burn yourself out and you deserve to like your relationship and your life with your dog, even if it's a little hard sometimes. I try to shift so much from how do I prevent anything terrible from happening to how do I live a reasonable, sustainable life with me and my dog, minimizing the distress for both of us. And then what do I need to have the skills to recover when life happens? Because I tell this to my clients and I tell this to my mentees, the only thing that I can guarantee is that life is going to happen. That's it. And so I'm doing you a disservice if I don't work to help you prepare for the times when your dog is hungry or like my own dog, Griffey. If you've seen any of my content, I talk about him a lot right now. We're tapering into fall in the Pacific Northwest. And he has really terrible allergies, like catastrophic allergies for him. I tried to taper off his medication, see if we were out of the season where he needed the double dose of the allergy medication. And it was a mistake. We live and we learn. Trial and eval. I trialed, I evaled, it was a mistake. And so we had to get him back on it. But when his skin doesn't feel well, his reactivity is higher, his separation anxiety comes back. And so I know his conditions are terrible. His body is not comfortable. His body is not okay. I'm not going to ask him to practice all of these skills when conditions aren't what we worked under. And I'm not exposing him to these conditions to learn a new skill set under them. That's out of alignment with how I want to live my life with my dog. But I do know that when we have stressful events, like, oh, I don't know, my partner and I decide to move across the country for the 5th time, this last one was very stressful, and it was very clear who in the house had the most investment in their recovery and their stress management and their regulation skills, because Griffey had a grand old time and the rest of us were very stressed about it, but he was thriving.
Well, that's amazing for Griffey. And then makes me thinking as well about learning to and how you view yourself and perfection. And let's say that I was eating really well and I was feeling energized throughout the day, and therefore, what's the root cause? Parenting. To be honest with you, the motivation is being a good parent. And if I have more energy, I have more capacity and I can parent better. But then, we could define what that looks like, but it's a topic for another podcast. But I could then go on holiday and drink and eat crap and come back and eat continually on the mix of the holiday and healthy diet when I get back and be like, oh my God, like you've regressed, like you're not perfect or whatever. But then I realized like regression, I was talking to someone about this the other day because they wanted to do something about regression. I was like, oh, I don't really understand what regression. But I was like, regression in my case is the absence of successful protocols. So generalization as well for yourself, for your clients, or for your non-human learners is to say, are we able to teach the successful protocols to the humans and have them apply those successful protocols across a whole range of situations? For me, in my eating example, it was like, well, what were your successful protocols, Ryan? And I identified a couple of things that when I'm not doing those anymore, I need to do those to get back to what I was. How does that land for you? I'm just talking at you, Alan. I'm not asking questions. So just tell me what my thoughts make you think.
So if we're taking so many things. Hold on. So there are times when I get really excited about something. It feels in my brain. I feel like my brain is, I don't know if you've seen the videos on social media of like, it's typically some sort of retriever, a lab or a golden, and there's a big bucket of tennis balls, and then all the tennis balls drop, and the dog is just like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. That's how my brain feels with what you just said. And it's a very reinforcing experience. So I think that there are a couple of things that we can pull away. So if we were to talk about the diet changes, maybe a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic, insulin resistant. And so I started working with a nutritionist to figure out like, what are the factors that I need to take into account? How do I take care of myself in a way that I feel good and my body responds well and all of the things? And the diet that my body needs is very, very strange. It took us probably 6 months to land on like, what are the levels of these different macros and micronutrients that my body responds really well to? And I got really worried when I was going to go to Clicker Expo last year, because it would be the first time that I didn't have full control over my diet. It was going to be the first time that I was going to be in that kind of environment since the last time I had been in an environment like that was the Clicker Expo that got canceled. So like, it's been a long time. And the skill that had to be generalized was getting enough protein, getting enough fiber. I didn't have to worry about all of the other things. I didn't have to worry about the balances. I needed the generalized skills of protein and fiber. And those were the things that were able to carry us away. So a dietitian very easily could have said, you need to eat this much fruit and this much vegetable, and it needs to be this many vegetables and all of the things. And my dietitian took me through a really beautiful process of, let's look at what reality is. Like, just show me what you're doing. And then the next week or so, I want you to make this one change. And then the next week or so, I want you to make this one change. And then the next week or so, I want you to make this one change. And so I was gradually layering in these skills that was able to then generalize to this environment. And instead of her saying, like, you need this, 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 and this, she said, this is the rough bucket. This is the rough bucket. Here's how you identify protein and carbohydrate and fiber. And you find those things for yourself. And then you're able to build a plate. So I could go into the little buffet area and be like, okay, I need X amount of protein. I need X amount of fiber. I need X amount of carbs. And then for my own purposes, fats kind of went by the wayside because I can only hold so many numbers. And so I was able to look around and be like, okay, here's how I make protein. Here's how I make fiber. Here's how I make my carb. And then we were good. And I was able to follow up with all of the things. If we were to take the same thing back to ourselves, felt great, all of the things. What I would do for a dog, same process. Let's change one or two small things at a time. I'm not going to overhaul your whole environment unless I have seen that you are able to do that. So some dogs are going to have a big enough skill set that we can ask significantly more of them and they can do it. Average pet dog, probably not. If we were to apply it to the nose to hand target in that group class setting, part of making it stick and making it generalizable is making it relevant. So my dietitian was able to say, okay, I want you to try this much protein. How does this feel for you? And I will tell you, when I don't eat as much protein as I am supposed to, I can tell. It is very punishing. And so I will respond. Same with fiber. If I don't eat enough fiber, my body tells me, and it is very punishing. And then I can't be my best self. And I want to be my best self to the definition of what my best self is. And y'all don't need to hear me ramble. Same for the clients, though. So nose to hand target, it isn't, here's a skill, the end. It's nose to hand target. Let's establish the skill for you and your dog. Let me then maybe be really creative and say, what are 10 ways in this class as the instructor that I can use that skill that I taught you in multiple ways so that we are maybe hitting the things that people care about, like, I don't know, loose leash walking, with a skill that we already established. That is the one that when in doubt, I want them to lean on. So can I use nose to hand target to teach loose leash walking? Can I use nose to hand target to teach go to bed? Can I use nose to hand target to teach recall back and forth between people? Can I use nose to hand target to teach them to get up on a platform? Or if you're going to make it fun and fancy, we used to have like a skateboard or weave poles or something. So can I layer in elements of play and excitement and then make nose to hand target relevant in these different contexts so that when somebody later is in a different context, they say, I always said, my goal is that you always think, what did that nice lady in that dog training class say? Oh yeah, let me try this and see if it will work. And I've had a lot of success with that. Being able to say, all right, I want you to have this as a fallback skill. For me, it's going to typically be a treat scatter. For dogs, there are conditions where that is not appropriate, but as a general blanket statement, I want dogs to be able to engage with a treat scatter. And so I am going to give my clients a bunch of different ways to practice that so it becomes that muscle memory. When in doubt, throw food. When in doubt, throw food, if it is appropriate and safe for the conditions we are under. Caveat asterisk. What do you think?
I'm inspired. Like, I think that I'm thinking of, because a lot of my work, Ellen, is engaging with our members in our online community who are, and we've been running that community for 10 years now. So a little bit of a data, a latent database inside my own brain of the problems that people bring. And one of the problems that people bring is getting started with either their dog training business and needing to set up a class, or wanting to start a new class and figuring out how to logistically set that up. But the inspiration I got from what you just said is, oh, cool. Now I can help people out by saying just teach one thing, but just teach that one thing across all of these different contexts, which is logically as well such a smarter thing to help your clients as they go about life with their learners. Sadly, we are at the end of part two. And there's a question I'd like to ask all of our guests before we wrap up, and that is what they would like to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years in the animal training world. Now, we've been doing this podcast for nearly 10 years, so this question is really relevant. If you're listening to this show and you're listening to earlier episodes of the show, then listen to what the answers to these questions are. And generally speaking, they are universal messages across industries and countries and people, but also uniquely unique to the individual guests. So I can't wait to hear what your hope is for the next 5 to 10 years in our industry, Alan.
Yeah. At least in the US, this is becoming more of a thing. It may be in other countries already. And like, congratulations, you're really ahead of the curve here. But we're starting to see more of an emphasis, at least in behavior consulting and that realm, veterinary medicine, an awareness of the tax on people. So there's some clinics out here, veterinary behaviorists, that introduced us to caregiver burden score. And it's an assessment of how taxing is this caregiver burden to the pet parent. And that is really a beautiful way to know how we need to develop our plan in order for it to be sustainable. So like I always tell my mentees, when someone is drowning, you actually need to give them a life raft. You don't need to give them the skills to swim. So let's get the life raft in the water, get them on it. And then once they're not exhausted anymore, that's when we can start to teach them to swim so they don't need the life raft next time. And that way, I just love the emphasis on how do we help the human to help the dog that I'm starting to see. And I'm just excited for how much it's going to grow by 10 years from now, after how much I've seen it grow in the last couple.
I love it. We just want to go to learn more about caregiving burden.
Do you have show notes? I can send you some resources.
Yeah, cool. I'll be interested in those. Well, once again, thanks so much for sharing everything with us over these last 2 episodes, Ellen. Just before we do officially wrap up, though, we talked about this in part 1, but can you just remind everyone listening where they can go to find you online?
Yes, you can find us at petharmonytraining.com. If you're a pet parent, which I'm sure many of you are, we are also on Facebook and Instagram at Pet Harmony Training. And if you're a pet professional, we are on Instagram and TikTok at Pet Harmony Pro.
Amazing. And we will, of course, link to all of this in the show notes as well, Ellen. This has been so much fun. So from myself and on behalf of everyone listening, thank you so much for hanging out with us here at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.